Human baby won't let bear. Cub sleep alone. Everyone was in shock. After watching this, let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The autumn breeze whispered through the pines surrounding the Mason family's remote cabin, carrying the sweet scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. Inside the warm haven, little Lily Mason, barely 14 months old with curls as golden as honey, played quietly on a handmade quilt. Her mother, Grace, busied herself preparing dinner in the kitchen, occasionally glancing at her daughter through the open doorway. "Almost ready, sweetheart," Grace called, the gentle clatter of pots and pans filling the cabin with homely sounds. Outside, the forest grew darker as evening approached. The first stars peeked through gaps in the clouds, watching over the wild creatures settling down for the night. Among them, a small black bear cub with a distinctive white patch on its chest had wandered too far from its mother. The little cub, whom the local rangers had nicknamed Star for the marking on its chest, sniffed the air anxiously, its tiny paws crunching on fallen leaves. Star had never been alone before. The forest felt enormous and threatening, without Mother Bear's protective presence. The cub whimpered softly, turning in confused circles, each unfamiliar sound making it tremble. Hunger gnawed at its belly, and the approaching night brought a chill that seeped through its fur. A sudden gust of wind carried the scent of the Mason family's dinner toward the lost cub. Driven by instinct and desperation, Star followed the promising aroma, each cautious step bringing it closer to the cabin's golden glow. Meanwhile, little Lily had crawled to the window, pressing her tiny palms against the glass. Her bright blue eyes widened as she spotted movement at the edge of the clearing. There, partially hidden by shadows, stood the trembling bear cub, looking small and frightened against the vastness of the darkening forest. Something stirred in Lily's young heart, a feeling she couldn't name but felt deeply. The baby girl watched as the cub pawed at the ground, its head low, making soft sounds that even through the glass seemed like cries of distress. Grace, unaware of the visitor outside or her daughter's fascination with it, called from the kitchen, "Lily, time for dinner, sweetie." But Lily remained transfixed by the lonely creature outside the window, a connection forming between them that transcended words and understanding. As night settled fully over the forest, the temperature dropped sharply. Star, the bear cub, exhausted from wandering, collapsed under the protective branches of a pine tree just 30 yards from the Mason's cabin. The little creature curled into a tight ball, trying to preserve what warmth remained in its small body. Its soft whimpers carried on the night air, a plaintive call for a mother who couldn't hear. Inside, Grace had finished feeding Lily and was cleaning up the kitchen, while her husband Thomas reviewed some paperwork by the fireplace. "I think we might get the first frost tonight," Thomas remarked, glancing out the window at the clear, star-filled sky. Lily, placed in her playpen near the warm hearth, seemed unusually restless. She kept crawling to the edge of the enclosure, standing on wobbly legs to peer out the window, making insistent noises that grew increasingly urgent. "What's got into you tonight, little one?" Thomas asked, ruffling his daughter's golden curls. Lily responded by pointing emphatically toward the window, her face scrunched with determination. Grace dried her hands on a kitchen towel and joined them. "She's been doing that all evening. Maybe she saw a deer or something earlier." Thomas lifted Lily into his arms and walked to the window. "Let's see what's got you so worked up, shall we?" In the moonlight, they could just make out a small dark shape beneath the nearby pine. At first, Thomas thought it was a rock or fallen branch, but then it moved slightly. a pitiful cry reaching their ears even through the glass. "Is that a bear cub?" Grace whispered, moving closer. Thomas nodded slowly, concern etching lines across his forehead. "Looks like it. Poor thing must be separated from its mother." He turned to Grace, their eyes meeting in silent communication. "This could be dangerous if the mother is looking for it." "We should call the forest ranger," Grace suggested, already reaching for her phone. "They can safely reunite them." While her parents discussed what to do, Lily grew increasingly agitated in her father's arms. She squirmed and reached toward the window, making urgent sounds that seemed to say, help it now." The ranger, when called, explained he couldn't arrive until morning due to a forest fire emergency on the other side of the mountain. "Keep your doors locked," he warned. "The mother bear will be searching and could be aggressive. Stay inside, keep lights low, and make no attempt to approach the cub." After hanging up, Grace and Thomas exchanged worried glances. "We should move away from the windows," Thomas suggested. "Let's get Lily ready for bed." But Lily would not be calmed. As Grace carried her toward the nursery, the baby's cries grew louder, her little body arching back toward the window. Outside, the temperature continued to drop, and the cub's cries became more feeble. "I've never seen her like this," Grace said, bouncing Lily gently to soothe her. "It's like she knows something's wrong out there." Thomas peered out the window again. "The cub doesn't look good. It's too cold tonight for something so small." He ran a hand through his hair, torn between safety and compassion. "If its mother doesn't find it soon." As if understanding, Lily's cries suddenly stopped. She hiccuped softly, tears still wet on her cheeks, and pointed once more to the window. Then, with deliberate movements, she pointed to her own warm blanket, then back to the window. Grace and Thomas stared at their daughter, then at each other, struck by the simple wisdom of a child too young to speak, but old enough to feel empathy. "She wants to help it," Grace whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it's crazy," Thomas said slowly, "but I think she's right. We can't just watch it freeze to death." As they deliberated, the wind picked up, howling around the cabin's eaves like a mournful song. The cub's cries grew weaker, barely audible now over the rising storm. Thomas pulled on his heavy coat and boots, his movements quick but measured. "I'll just place a blanket over it and move back. No contact. Just enough to help it through the night until the ranger comes." He selected a thick woolen blanket from the closet, old and weathered but warm. "Be careful," Grace pleaded, holding Lily close. The baby had grown strangely calm, as if sensing her father's decision to help. Thomas stepped onto the porch, the cold air biting at his exposed face. The cub lay motionless beneath the pine, its small body barely visible in the shadows. Moving slowly, each step deliberate, Thomas approached, the blanket held out before him like a shield. 20 feet away, a twig snapped beneath his boot. The cub's head shot up, dark eyes reflecting moonlight, fear evident in its posture. Thomas froze, heart hammering against his ribs. "It's okay," he whispered, though he knew the words meant nothing to the wild creature. "Just trying to help you, little one." From the cabin window, Grace watched with bated breath, Lily unusually still in her arms. The scene before them seemed suspended in time, a man and a wild creature, separated by both distance and nature, yet connected by a moment of need. Thomas took another careful step forward, then another. The cub watched him warily but didn't flee, perhaps too weak or too cold to move. Just as Thomas came within reach, ready to gently drape the blanket, a deep, rumbling growl cut through the night air. Time seemed to stop. At the edge of the clearing, illuminated by moonlight, stood a massive form. The mother bear, her eyes reflecting fury and fear, her posture unmistakably threatening. "Thomas!" Grace's scream pierced the night. Inside, Lily began to cry, as if sensing the sudden danger. Thomas stood perfectly still, the blanket clutched in his frozen hands, caught between the cub and its approaching mother. The adult bear took a menacing step forward, another growl building in her throat. In that critical moment, something extraordinary happened. Lily, struggling in her mother's arms, let out a sound. Not a cry of fear, but a soft, cooing noise, surprisingly loud in the tense silence. It was the same sound she made when playing with her stuffed animals, a sound of comfort and care. The mother bear paused, her massive head turning toward the cabin window where the sound originated. For a heartbeat, her eyes seemed to meet Lily's across the distance, something unspoken passing between them. Thomas, seizing the moment of distraction, gently tossed the blanket so it settled over the cub like a protective tent. Then, moving backwards with exquisite slowness, he began retreating toward the cabin. The mother bear's attention returned to Thomas, then to her cub, which had emerged partway from beneath the blanket, looking warmer and somewhat revived. The massive bear approached her offspring, sniffing cautiously at the human-scented blanket. Grace had the door open, urging Thomas to hurry while trying to keep Lily from squirming out of her arms. The baby was making those same cooing sounds, reaching toward the bears as if trying to communicate. Thomas backed onto the porch, then inside, closing the door with trembling hands. The family huddled by the window, watching as the mother bear nuzzled her cub, seemingly inspecting it for harm. To their astonishment, the mother bear didn't tear away the blanket. Instead, after a thorough examination of her cub, she settled down beside it, allowing the woolen covering to remain, providing additional warmth against the frosty night. "I don't believe it," Thomas whispered, his arm around Grace's shoulders, Lily between them. She understood. Somehow, she understood we were trying to help. Outside, the mother bear's massive form curled protectively around her cub, both partially covered by the human blanket, an image so incongruous it seemed almost magical in the moonlight. Morning arrived with gentle fingers of light stretching across the frost-covered clearing. The Mason family, after a night of intermittent sleep and constant vigilance, gathered at the window to check on their unusual neighbors. The bears were gone, the blanket left behind, a rumpled testament to the night's extraordinary events. But they hadn't gone far. At the edge of the forest, the mother bear stood watching the cabin, her cub beside her, healthy and energetic in the morning light. "They waited," Grace breathed, bouncing Lily gently in her arms. "It's almost like they wanted us to see they're okay." As if in confirmation, the mother bear nudged her cub, and together they turned, disappearing into the forest's embrace, the white, star-shaped patch on the cub's chest visible until the very last moment. The ranger arrived an hour later, skeptical of their story until shown the blanket with its clear evidence of bear fur. "In 20 years I've never heard of such a thing," he admitted, examining the claw marks on the wool. "Mother bears are fiercely protective. For her to accept your help—" He shook his head in wonder. "It wasn't us," Thomas explained, watching Lily play contentedly on her quilt. "It was Lily. Somehow she knew the cub needed help, and somehow she made the mother understand we weren't a threat." The ranger knelt beside Lily, who offered him a toothy smile. "Well, little one, you may have just rewritten everything we know about human-wildlife interaction." News of the event spread quickly through the small mountain community. Neighbors visited, curious and amazed. Some brought casseroles and pies. Others just wanted to hear the story firsthand. The local newspaper sent a reporter who published an article titled, "Babies Compassion Bridges Species Divide." Wildlife researchers arrived, asking endless questions, taking samples of the bear fur on the blanket, requesting Thomas and Grace document any future sightings. One researcher, Dr. Eleanor Webb, spent hours observing Lily at play, fascinated by the baby's unusual empathy. Children her age typically don't demonstrate this level of compassionate response, Dr. Webb explained, watching Lily share her toys with a visiting child. They're still largely egocentric. What Lily did, recognizing suffering in another species and insisting on action, that's extraordinary. As weeks passed, the Mason family occasionally glimpsed the mother bear and her cub at the forest's edge, always at a safe distance, always watching the cabin with what seemed like curious recognition. One evening, as the first snow of winter began to fall, Grace found Thomas and Lily at the window, gazing out at the whitening landscape. "Do you think they'll be okay out there?" Thomas wondered aloud, bouncing Lily on his knee. "Bears know how to survive winter," Grace assured him, joining them at the window. "They've been doing it long before we came along." But Lily, with the wisdom that sometimes seems unique to children, pointed to the old blanket they had kept as a memento, now folded neatly on a shelf, then out toward the forest, her meaning clear despite her lack of words. The message was simple. Sometimes even those well-equipped for hardship need a little help, a little kindness, a reminder they're not alone in the cold. Thomas smiled, pressing a kiss to his daughter's head. "You're right, sweetheart. And that's a lesson worth remembering." In the days that followed, Thomas built a simple shelter at the forest's edge, stocked with blankets. The family never saw the bears use it, but occasionally they would find the blankets rearranged, a sign that their gesture hadn't gone unnoticed. The story of Lily and the bear cub became something of a legend in the community, retold around fireplaces on cold winter nights, a reminder that compassion can transcend barriers of language and species, that sometimes the wisest hearts are the youngest, and that an act of kindness, no matter how small, creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. And little Lily, too young to understand her impact, continued to watch the forest with knowing eyes, as if aware that somewhere among the trees, a bear cub with a star on its chest was growing stronger because one cold night, a human baby wouldn't let it sleep alone. Spring came to the mountains with a riot of wildflowers and new life. Lily, now approaching her second birthday, had begun forming simple sentences, though her favorite word remained a delighted bear, whenever the family drove past the spot where they'd encountered the cub. One warm afternoon, while Grace hung laundry in the yard and Thomas repaired the porch steps, Lily played in her small sandbox nearby. A movement at the forest edge caught Grace's attention, a flash of black fur, larger than before. "Thomas," she called softly, motioning him over. "Look." There, partially concealed by new foliage, stood the mother bear. Beside her was Star, no longer a tiny cub but a growing youngster, still bearing the distinctive white chest marking. What made Grace catch her breath, however, was the smaller cub beside them, a new addition to the family. "She brought her new baby to show us," Thomas whispered, amazement clear in his voice. Lily, noticing her parents' distraction, turned toward the forest. Her delighted squeal carried across the yard. "Bear! Baby bear!" The mother bear's ears twitched at the sound of Lily's voice. For a long moment, the massive creature stood watching the human child, her gaze inscrutable yet somehow knowing. Then, with gentle nudges, she guided her cubs deeper into the forest, disappearing among the trees, but leaving behind a sense of connection that defied explanation. That night, as Grace tucked Lily into bed, The little girl pointed to her favorite picture book. "Bears sleep," she said solemnly. "Yes, bears sleep in the forest," Grace agreed, opening the book. Lily shook her head, her expression earnest. "Not alone." She hugged her stuffed bear tight against her chest. "Not alone." Grace felt tears prick her eyes, understanding dawning. "That's right, sweetheart. Nobody should sleep alone if they're scared or cold." She brushed a golden curl from Lily's forehead. "That's what you taught us all." By summer, the story had spread far beyond their small mountain community. A wildlife photographer, camping in the area to document black bear behavior, captured a remarkable image: the mother bear and her two cubs, including Star with his distinctive marking, peacefully foraging at the forest's edge with the Mason cabin visible in the background. The photograph went viral online, and soon reporters from national networks arrived, eager to interview the family about what many were calling the miracle of compassion. Dr. Eleanor Webb returned with colleagues from a prestigious university, setting up cameras at the forest edge with the Masons' permission. "We're studying interspecies empathy," she explained. Lily's experience could help us understand the emotional capabilities of both human infants and wild animals. Local schools incorporated the story into their curriculum, teaching children about wildlife conservation and empathy. The ranger station established a program called Star's Friends, educating visitors about respectful coexistence with wildlife. Thomas found himself speaking at community events, sharing their experience despite his natural shyness. "What our daughter showed us that night wasn't just compassion for one bear cub," he would say. "She showed us that helping others isn't always about what's safe or rational. Sometimes it's simply about what's right." Grace, meanwhile, began volunteering with wildlife rehabilitation centers. Her perspective forever changed by watching her daughter's instinctive kindness bridge an ancient divide between human and wild. As for Lily, she remained remarkably unaffected by the attention, displaying the same quiet empathy toward everyone and everything she encountered. She made friends easily, shared generously, and continued to show particular interest in animals of all kinds. One evening, as the family enjoyed dinner on their porch, a neighbor stopped by with news. "They're naming that new wildlife corridor after Lily," he announced proudly, "the Lily Mason Wildlife Passage. It'll help bears and other animals safely migrate across the valley." Thomas squeezed his daughter's small hand. "Hear that, Lily? You're helping lots of bears now, not just Star." Lily smiled, but seemed more interested in sharing her carrots with the neighbor's dog, demonstrating in her own way that compassion wasn't something to be celebrated. It was simply how one should live. Autumn returned to the mountains, painting the forests in brilliant hues of red and gold. The Masons had grown accustomed to their minor celebrity status, though they tried to maintain as normal a life as possible for Lily's sake. One crisp morning, Thomas was splitting firewood when the hair on the back of his neck stood up. That primal human sense of being watched. He turned slowly, axe lowering to his side. At the edge of the clearing stood a black bear, larger than any he'd seen before. For a moment, fear clutched his heart, until he noticed the distinctive white marking on its chest. Star had returned, no longer a cub, but a magnificent young bear. Thomas remained perfectly still, respecting the wild creature's space. "Hello, Star," he said softly, not expecting understanding, but feeling the need to acknowledge this extraordinary visit. The bear watched him with intelligent eyes, head slightly tilted as if listening. Then, to Thomas's astonishment, Star dropped something from his mouth onto the ground before backing away several steps. When the bear had retreated to a safe distance, Thomas cautiously approached the object. His breath caught when he recognized it, a fragment of the woolen blanket they had given Star that cold night almost a year ago. The bear had kept it, carried it, and now, inexplicably, returned it. That evening, as the family examined the tattered piece of wool, Grace voiced what they were all thinking. It's like he wanted to say thank you. Dr. Webb, when consulted by phone, was cautiously amazed. Bears are known to use tools and solve problems, but this kind of behavior, returning an object after such time, suggests a level of memory and association we haven't documented before. The fragment of blanket was placed in a small frame on the wall, a reminder of connections that defied scientific explanation. As fall deepened toward winter, Lily, now speaking in complete sentences, began asking about her bear with increasing frequency. She would stand at the window, searching the forest edge, sometimes calling out as if expecting Star to answer. "I'm a little worried," Grace confided to Thomas one night after Lily was asleep. "She seems so fixated on Star. What if she thinks all bears are friendly? It could be dangerous." Thomas nodded, equally concerned. "Tomorrow, I'll take her to the ranger station. Ranger Mike can explain about wild animals in a way she might understand." The following day, Ranger Mike showed Lily pictures of different bears, explaining gently but firmly that wild animals needed space and respect. "You were very lucky with Star," he told her, "but most bears don't want to be friends with people. They just want to live quietly in the forest." Lily listened solemnly, then pointed to a map on the wall. "Where's Star now?" The ranger smiled kindly. "Bears don't tell us where they're going, but he's probably finding a cozy den for winter. Bears sleep through the cold months." "Like hibernation," Lily said, surprising both Thomas and the ranger with her vocabulary. "That's right," Ranger Mike confirmed. "They sleep all winter and wake up in spring when food is plentiful again." On the drive home, Lily was unusually quiet, processing this new information. Finally, she announced, "Star sleeps in winter. But he's not alone. He has his mama." Thomas glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, struck by her continued empathy for the bear's emotional well-being. "That's right, sweetheart, and when he grows up more, he'll find his own family too." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Like me, I have you and Mommy." That night, as the first snowflakes of winter drifted past Lily's bedroom window, she placed her stuffed bear on the windowsill. "Good night, Star," she whispered. "Sleep warm." The winter proved unusually harsh, with record snowfalls and bitter cold gripping the mountains. The Mason family spent cozy evenings by their fireplace, reading stories, playing games, and watching the snow pile higher outside their windows. Lily's third birthday approached, and Grace busied herself planning a small celebration. "What kind of cake would you like, sweetheart?" she asked one morning as they baked cookies together. Lily, standing on a stool to reach the counter, considered the question with characteristic seriousness. "Bear cake," she decided finally. Grace smiled. "I think we can manage that." "A chocolate cake shaped like a bear?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, then added, "with a star on his chest." Thomas, entering the kitchen with an armload of firewood, exchanged glances with Grace. Star remained a constant presence in their daughter's thoughts, even though they hadn't seen the bear since his brief appearance in the fall. The day before Lily's birthday, a blizzard descended on the mountains, wind howling around the cabin like a living thing. The power went out shortly after dinner, leaving them with only the fireplace and battery-powered lanterns for light and warmth. "Quite the birthday eve," Thomas remarked, adding another log to the fire. "Good thing we have the generator for the refrigerator at least." Grace nodded, wrapping a blanket around Lily's shoulders as the little girl played with her toys by firelight. "The cake's finished at least. We'll have a cozy celebration tomorrow, power or no power." Late that night, after Lily had been tucked into bed with extra blankets, Thomas and Grace sat by the fire, listening to the storm rage outside. "Remember last winter?" Grace said softly. "How worried we were that Star wouldn't survive the cold." Thomas nodded, taking her hand. "And now we know he did. Bears are resilient." "Like people," Grace replied, resting her head on his shoulder. A sudden noise from outside made them both stiffen. A heavy thump against the side of the cabin, followed by what sounded like scratching. "Probably just a branch brought down by the wind," Thomas suggested, though he reached for the flashlight beside him. The sound came again, more deliberate this time. Exchanging concerned glances, they moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to peer into the snowy darkness. The beam of Thomas's flashlight cut through the swirling snow, illuminating something large and dark pressed against the side of the cabin. As the light steadied, they gasped in unison. A bear, massive, its black fur dusted with snow, was huddled against the cabin wall, seeking shelter from the brutal storm. Even through the frosted glass, they could see the distinctive white marking on its chest. "Star," Grace whispered, her hand tightening on Thomas's arm. "He's enormous now." "He's trying to get out of the wind," Thomas observed, noting how the bear had positioned itself in the lee of the cabin where the snow was less deep and the biting wind partially blocked. "Should we call the ranger?" Grace asked, though she knew the roads would be impassable until the storm cleared. Thomas was silent for a long moment, watching the bear. Star wasn't acting aggressively, just seeking a marginally warmer place in a deadly storm. "No," he decided finally. "He's not hurting anything, and we owe him this much shelter at least." Throughout the night they took turns checking on both Lily and their unexpected guest. Star remained in the same spot, occasionally visible when the swirling snow cleared momentarily, a dark shadow against the white world. At dawn, the storm began to ease, the howling wind dropping to occasional gusts. Thomas, who had taken the last watch, blinked in surprise as he peered out the window. "Grace," he called softly, "come see this." The area beside the cabin where Star had sheltered was empty now, but the bear hadn't gone far. He stood at the edge of the clearing, looking back at the cabin. Beside him, to the mason's astonishment, was another bear, smaller, without the white chest marking. "Is that a female?" Grace asked, squinting through the frosty glass. Before Thomas could answer, a small voice behind them said, "Star brought a friend." They turned to find Lily in her nightgown, clutching her stuffed bear, her eyes wide as she took in the scene outside. "He did," Thomas agreed, lifting her for a better view. "And now that the storm is ending, they're heading back to the forest." As if hearing his words, Star turned away from the cabin, the female bear following. They moved with surprising grace for such large creatures, soon disappearing among the snow-laden trees. Lily waved at the departing bears. "Bye, Star. Happy birthday to me." Later that day, as they celebrated Lily's birthday with the bear-shaped cake, a ranger called to check on them after the blizzard. During the conversation, he mentioned something curious. "We've had reports of bears acting strangely during the storm," he explained. "Usually they stay deep in the forest during winter, but several cabins reported bears sheltering nearby. Almost like they've learned houses mean warmth." After hanging up, Thomas recounted the conversation to Grace while Lily played with her new toys. "You don't think—" Grace began. Thomas shrugged. "That Star taught other bears humans can help during storms. Who knows? But it's nice to think that kindness might spread. even among wild creatures. That evening, as Thomas tucked Lily into bed, she asked for a story about Star. "Which one would you like?" Thomas asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "The one about the night we found him, or the one about when he brought back the blanket piece?" Lily shook her head. "New story, about Star's friend." Thomas smiled, stroking his daughter's hair. "Well, once there was a brave young bear named Star, who learned that sometimes different kinds of creatures can help each other. And when he grew older and met a beautiful lady bear, he wanted to show her this important lesson." As Thomas spun a gentle tale of bears and humans living in respectful harmony, Lily drifted toward sleep, her small face peaceful in the soft lamplight. Outside, the stars emerged as the clouds cleared, shining down on a world transformed by snow, and perhaps, in some small way, by the compassion of a child who once wouldn't let a bear cub sleep alone. The long winter eventually released its grip on the mountains, snowdrifts giving way to muddy pathways and then to carpets of wildflowers. The forest awakened with new life. Birds returning from southern migrations, deer venturing from sheltered valleys, and bears emerging hungry from their winter dens. Lily, now a bright and curious 3-year-old, spent increasing time outdoors under her parents' watchful eyes. Her golden curls had darkened slightly to honey brown, but her compassionate nature remained unchanged. She collected hurt flowers with broken stems, creating hospitals for them in cups of water, and insisted on releasing spiders found in the house rather than squashing them. One mild April morning, the Mason family decided to enjoy breakfast on their porch, soaking in the spring sunshine. Thomas flipped pancakes on a portable griddle, while Grace and Lily set the table. "Listen," Grace said suddenly, holding up a hand. From the forest came the unmistakable sound of branches breaking and undergrowth being disturbed. Something large was moving toward the clearing. Thomas instinctively moved closer to Lily, scanning the forest edge with cautious eyes. A black bear emerged from the trees, its massive body moving with surprising grace. Even before they saw the white marking on its chest, they recognized Star in the confident way he carried himself, in the curious tilt of his head as he observed the family. "Star!" Lily cried out in delight, taking a step forward before Grace gently caught her arm. "Stay with me, sweetheart," Grace reminded her. "Remember what Ranger Mike said about giving wild animals space." Lily nodded reluctantly, her eyes never leaving the bear. "He got bigger," she observed. Indeed, Star had grown considerably over the winter. Now, fully mature, he presented an impressive figure against the backdrop of spring greenery. But what drew their attention most was his companion, the same female bear they had glimpsed after the blizzard, now following Star into the clearing. "He brought his friend again," Thomas remarked, keeping his voice low and calm. But that wasn't all. Behind the female bear, tumbling and frolicking in the new grass, came 2 small cubs, their black fur glossy in the morning light. "Babies!" Lily exclaimed, clapping her hands in excitement. The Mason family watched in awe as Star's new family explored the edge of the clearing. The cubs, curious and playful, pounced on spring flowers and chased butterflies while their mother kept a watchful eye on them. Star, meanwhile, maintained his position halfway between his bear family and the human family, as if intentionally bridging 2 worlds. "He's showing us his family," Grace whispered, tears welling in her eyes, "just like he showed them our cabin during the blizzard." For nearly 10 minutes, this extraordinary scene continued. 2 families, 1 human and 1 bear, sharing a peaceful morning across the divide of a sun-dappled clearing. Then, with a soft grunt, the mother bear called her cubs, who obediently scampered to her side. Star lingered a moment longer, his dark eyes seeming to meet each of the Mason's gazes in turn, before following his family back into the forest. The story might have ended there, a beautiful, fleeting moment of connection across species. But later that day, Thomas discovered something on the porch steps that changed everything. "Grace, Lily," he called, his voice filled with wonder. "Come see this." There, placed with surprising delicacy on the bottom step, was a honeycomb, golden and dripping with wild honey. Around it, fresh wildflowers had been scattered, as if in offering. Ranger Mike, when called to examine this phenomenon, was speechless at first. "Bears don't give gifts," he stated finally. Taking photographs of the honeycomb, it's not in their nature. "Star isn't just any bear," Lily declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. The ranger knelt to her level. "Lily, I've worked with wildlife for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Whatever happened between you and that bear cub has created something extraordinary." Dr. Eleanor Webb returned with her research team, setting up more sophisticated observation equipment at the forest edge. "We're documenting potentially groundbreaking interspecies behavior," she explained, excitement evident in her voice. "This could revolutionize our understanding of animal cognition and emotional capacity." As April turned to May, the visits continued. Star would appear at the forest's edge every few days, sometimes alone, sometimes with his mate and cubs. They never approached the cabin closely when together, maintaining a respectful distance, but their presence became a comforting constant in the Masons' lives. Other families in the area began reporting similar experiences, bears observing them from a distance, showing curiosity rather than aggression, sometimes even leaving small gifts of honeycomb or berries. "It's like they're establishing diplomatic relations," one neighbor joked at a community meeting, but Ranger Mike took the situation seriously. "Whatever's happening here, it's spreading. The bears are learning from each other, passing on new behaviors. It's unprecedented." For Lily, however, it was simply the natural order of things. "Star was scared and alone," she explained to anyone who asked why the bears behaved so unusually. "We helped him. Now he knows humans can be nice." One evening, as the family enjoyed the sunset from their porch, Grace asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Do you think we should be documenting all this? For science, I mean." Thomas considered this, watching the golden light paint the forest edge. "Maybe, but part of me wants to keep some of this sacred, I guess. Some connections aren't meant to be dissected and analyzed." As darkness fell and they moved inside, neither noticed the shadowy figure watching from the forest. Not a bear this time, but a human, camera in hand, capturing their every move. The video appeared online 3 days later, shaky footage of Star and his family at the edge of the Masons' clearing, followed by shots of the Masons on their porch, watching the bears with evident familiarity. The amateur wildlife photographer who'd captured the footage had added a sensationalized title, "Unbelievable, Family Has Bear Visitors for Breakfast." By noon, the Masons' phone was ringing constantly. By evening, the first news van had navigated the mountain roads to park at the end of their driveway. "This is getting out of hand," Thomas muttered, pulling the curtains closed against the flashing cameras outside. "How did they even find our address?" Grace, keeping Lily occupied with puzzles in the back room away from windows, looked worried. "The video has over 1 million views already. Someone in town must have identified us." Ranger Mike arrived, his official vehicle creating a barrier between the news vans and the cabin. "I've contacted the wildlife department," he informed them after coming inside. "They're sending a team tomorrow. This situation has escalated beyond local interest." "What does that mean for Star and his family?" Grace asked, fear evident in her voice. The ranger's expression was grim. Bears that become habituated to humans often end up relocated or worse. I've explained this is different, that he's maintained appropriate distance, shown no aggression, but they'll want to assess the situation themselves. That night, after the reporters finally departed and Lily was asleep, Thomas and Grace sat at their kitchen table, faces drawn with worry. Maybe we should go stay with my parents for a while, Grace suggested, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Until this blows over. Thomas nodded slowly. Might be best, for Lily's sake and for Star's. The more humans gather here, the more likely something will go wrong. A soft knock at the back door startled them both. Thomas approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see Dr. Eleanor Webb standing alone on their back porch, her expression urgent. I came the back way through the forest, she explained when they let her in, brushing leaves from her jacket. The media circus out front is impossible. What's happening? Grace asked, offering the scientist a seat. Dr. Webb placed a tablet on the table, pulling up a satellite image of the surrounding forest. The wildlife department isn't just sending assessors, they're sending a capture team. She pointed to a marked area on the map. They've already set up a staging area here, less than 5 miles away. Capture? Thomas repeated, his stomach sinking. But why? Star hasn't done anything wrong. It's a standard protocol with bears showing unusual behavior around humans, Dr. Webb explained. From their perspective, they're preventing a potential tragedy. By creating one, Grace said bitterly, what would happen to him? Dr. Webb's silence was answer enough. We have to warn him, Lily's small voice came from the hallway, where she stood in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed bear. Star needs to hide. The adults exchanged glances, realizing Lily had heard everything. Grace knelt beside her daughter. Sweetheart, we can't exactly warn a wild animal. Bears don't understand. Star understands, Lily interrupted with absolute conviction. He knows things. I can tell him. Under normal circumstances, the adults might have gently explained the impossibility of such communication. But nothing about their situation was normal, and desperation sometimes opens minds to incredible possibilities. What would you tell him if you could? Dr. Webb asked Lily, her scientific curiosity piqued despite herself. To go far away, Lily replied, tears welling in her eyes. To take his family deep in the forest where bad people can't find them. Thomas looked at Grace, then at Dr. Webb. Is there anywhere they could go, somewhere safer? Dr. Webb hesitated, then pointed to the map again. There's a wilderness preserve on the other side of these mountains. No hunting allowed, minimal human presence. If they could make it there. How would we even begin to communicate that? Grace wondered aloud. But Lily was already moving to the back door, her small hand reaching for the knob with determination. I can do it. Star listens to me. Lily, no, Thomas said firmly, lifting her away from the door. It's too dangerous at night. Then tomorrow, Lily insisted, her usually gentle voice commanding. Before the bad people come. The adults spent hours debating options, weighing impossibilities against unthinkable outcomes. Finally, as dawn approached, they formulated a desperate plan. I can't believe we're even considering this, Grace said, rubbing her tired eyes. Dr. Webb, who had stayed through the night, looked equally exhausted but resolute. Sometimes science has to acknowledge when it doesn't have all the answers. Whatever bond exists between Lily and that bear, it's worth exploring every possibility. As the first light of dawn touched the mountains, they prepared for what might be their final chance to save Star and his family. Morning brought more news vans, wildlife officials in marked vehicles, and a growing crowd of curious onlookers held at bay by police tape at the end of the driveway. Inside, the Masons and Dr. Webb finalized their desperate plan. "I've mapped the most direct route to the Wilderness Preserve," Dr. Webb explained, showing them a marked trail on her tablet. "If, and I stress if, we could somehow communicate to Star to travel in this direction, it would give him and his family the best chance." Thomas studied the route. "That crosses 2 roads and passes near Williams' farm." "Unavoidable," Dr. Webb confirmed, "but minimal human contact compared to other routes." Lily, dressed in her favorite overalls and looking unusually solemn for a 3-year-old, had been quiet throughout the morning preparations. Now she tugged on her father's sleeve. "I need honey," she stated. "Honey?" Thomas asked, puzzled. "For Star, to show him the way." The adults exchanged glances. Lily's idea, born of a child's intuitive logic, sparked something in Dr. Webb's scientific mind. "Actually," the researcher said slowly, "bears have an incredible sense of smell. They can detect food from miles away." "You're not suggesting we create some kind of scent trail?" Grace asked, skeptical. "Not exactly, Doctor," Webb replied, increasingly animated, "but a series of olfactory waypoints, combined with visual markers Lily could help design. It's not impossible that an intelligent bear like Star could interpret them as directional indicators." Thomas looked doubtful. "Even if that worked, how do we get Lily close enough to Star to even begin this crazy plan? There are wildlife officials all over our property now." "Through there," Lily said confidently, pointing to a small door in the pantry, the entrance to a root cellar that extended partially under their back porch. Grace's eyes widened. The old cellar escape hatch. The cabin, built during Prohibition, had a secondary exit from the root cellar. A narrow tunnel leading to a concealed opening several yards into the forest, originally designed for smuggling operations. "It might be blocked after all these years," Thomas cautioned. "Only one way to find out," Dr. Webb replied. While Thomas investigated the tunnel, Grace distracted the officials at the front door, explaining that Lily was still asleep and they preferred not to disturb the research team's equipment setup. Meanwhile, Lily and Dr. Webb gathered their unusual supplies: honey, pine cones, bright fabric strips, and a small recorder with specific sounds Lily insisted would help Star understand. The tunnel, as it turned out, was passable, though cramped. It emerged, as Grace had remembered, beneath a fallen log 20 yards into the forest, invisible from the cabin but offering a clear view of the clearing beyond. "We'll have very little time," Dr. Webb warned as they finalized their plan. "The capture team is scheduled to deploy their traps at noon. It's 8:30 now." Thomas knelt before his daughter, his expression grave. "Lily, you understand this is very serious. You must stay with Dr. Webb the entire time. If she says run, you run. If she says hide, you hide. Promise me." Lily nodded solemnly. "I promise, Daddy, but Star won't hurt us." "It's not just Star I'm worried about," Thomas murmured, thinking of the armed wildlife officials surrounding their property. At 9 o'clock, while Grace engaged the wildlife department's lead biologist in a lengthy discussion about bear behavior on their front porch, Thomas helped Lily and Dr. Webb slip into the root cellar. He handed them a backpack containing their supplies and a satellite phone. 3 hours, he reminded them. "Then, I'm coming to find you, officials or no officials." Dr. Webb nodded, adjusting the backpack. "We'll be careful." "And Thomas, thank you for trusting me with your daughter." "I'm not sure I have a choice," he replied grimly, But Lily trusts you, and right now, that has to be enough. The journey through the tunnel was uncomfortable but brief. Emerging beneath the fallen log, Dr. Webb helped Lily climb out, then carefully scanned their surroundings. The forest was quiet except for birdsong and the distant sounds of vehicles and voices from the cabin's front yard. "Now what?" Dr. Webb whispered, feeling out of her depth despite her scientific credentials. Lily, however, appeared perfectly confident. She sat cross-legged on a patch of moss and closed her eyes. "We wait," she said simply. "Star will come." Dr. Webb, trained in empirical methods and data analysis, found herself doing something entirely unscientific, trusting a 3-year-old's intuition about wild animal behavior. She settled beside Lily, alert for any sign of danger, human or animal. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Dr. Webb checked her watch nervously, calculating the diminishing time before the capture operation would begin. Just as she was about to suggest they try another approach, Lily opened her eyes. "He's coming," she whispered, pointing to a dense thicket of pines to their left. Dr. Webb strained her eyes, seeing nothing but shadows and foliage. Then, almost imperceptibly, a shadow moved independently of the breeze, separating itself from the darkness beneath the pines. Star emerged, moving with the silent grace that belied his enormous size. The scientist instinctively tensed, adrenaline flooding her system. But Lily remained perfectly calm, her small face lighting up with recognition and joy. "Star," she said softly, not moving from her seated position, "you came." The bear paused 10 yards away, his intelligent eyes taking in the scene. The small human child he had known since she was a baby, and the unfamiliar adult beside her. He sniffed the air cautiously, head tilting in apparent recognition of Lily's scent. To Dr. Webb's astonishment, Star lowered himself to his stomach, a posture that somehow conveyed both caution and greeting. Though scientifically impossible, the bear's behavior strongly suggested recognition, even affection. "Bad people are coming," Lily told the bear, her voice clear but gentle. "They want to take you away." Star's ears flicked forward, his gaze intensely focused on Lily as if processing her words. "We need to show him the way to safety," Dr. Webb whispered, still scarcely believing what she was witnessing. Lily nodded, reaching for the backpack. She removed a small jar of honey, opened it, and dipped her fingers inside. "Star," she called softly, "watch." The bear remained perfectly still as Lily stood and approached a nearby pine tree. She smeared honey on the bark in a distinctive pattern, a rough circle with a dot in the center, reminiscent of Star's chest marking. Then she tied a bright red fabric strip above it. "This means go this way," she explained, pointing deeper into the forest, away from the cabin and the waiting wildlife officials. "Find more honey marks. They show the safe path." Dr. Webb watched in stunned silence as the child engaged in what appeared to be deliberate communication with a wild black bear. Her scientific mind cataloged every detail, even as her understanding of animal cognition was being fundamentally challenged. Lily returned to her original position and sat down again. "You need to take your family far away," she continued, her voice catching slightly, "where people can't find you." What happened next would feature in Dr. Webb's research papers for decades to come. Star rose from his prone position and approached the honey-marked tree. He sniffed the distinctive pattern, then the fabric strip. After a moment's consideration, he turned back to Lily and made a soft huffing sound. "He understands," Lily said confidently. Dr. Webb, finding her voice at last, whispered, "Lily, how can you possibly know that?" The little girl shrugged. "I just do. Like knowing when someone's sad without them saying." Star circled back toward the thicket he had emerged from, pausing once to look back at Lily. Then, with another soft huff, he disappeared into the forest. "We need to place the other markers quickly," Dr. Webb said, checking her watch. "We have less than 2 hours before the capture operation begins." Together, they moved deeper into the forest, following the route Dr. Webb had mapped out. At strategic intervals, they placed their unusual waypoints: honey patterns with fabric markers, pine cones arranged in arrow-like formations, and small drops of a special scent Dr. Webb had brought from her lab, designed to be particularly noticeable to bears but harmless to the environment. At specific locations, Lily insisted on playing recordings she had made, her own voice saying, "This way, Star," alternated with sounds of rushing water and rustling leaves. Dr. Webb, despite her scientific skepticism, found herself deferring to the child's inexplicable confidence. As they placed the final marker at the edge of a stream that would lead toward the wilderness preserve, they heard a commotion in the distance. Vehicles starting up, voices calling back and forth. "The capture operation has begun early," Dr. Webb realized with alarm, checking her satellite phone. "We need to get back." They hurried toward the cabin, taking a circuitous route to avoid the wildlife officials who were now spreading through the forest, setting traps and tracking stations. Reaching the fallen log that concealed their escape tunnel, they were horrified to find 2 uniformed officials examining the area. "Change of plans," Dr. Webb whispered, pulling Lily into the cover of dense ferns. "We'll have to go around." For nearly an hour, they picked their way carefully through the forest, stopping frequently to hide from search parties and officials. Lily, despite her young age, showed remarkable calm, following Dr. Webb's instructions with unwavering trust. Finally, they reached the edge of the clearing behind the cabin. To their dismay, several wildlife department vehicles were parked there, officials moving equipment between the forest and trucks. Dr. Webb's phone vibrated with a text from Thomas. "Front of cabin clear. Officials all in back. Come to front porch." "Taking a deep breath, Doctor." Webb lifted Lily into her arms. "We're going to walk very casually around the side of the cabin," she explained. "If anyone asks, we've been collecting leaves for your science project, understand?" Lily nodded against her shoulder. "Did we help Star?" she whispered. "We did everything possible, Doctor," Webb assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her confidence. "The rest is up to him." They emerged from the forest at the side of the cabin and walked deliberately toward the front, Dr. Webb nodding professionally at a surprised official who glanced their way. Reaching the front porch, they found Thomas waiting anxiously. "Thank God," he breathed, ushering them inside where Grace waited, pale with worry. "Did you?" "We marked the trail," Dr. Webb confirmed. "Whether Star follows it?" She spread her hands in a gesture of uncertainty. "He will," Lily stated with absolute conviction, climbing onto the window seat to look toward the forest. "He promised." The adults exchanged glances over her head, sharing a mixture of hope and resignation. Outside, the sounds of the capture operation continued. Engines revving, radios crackling, voices calling instructions. As evening approached, the Wildlife Department's lead biologist requested a meeting with the Masons. In their living room, surrounded by maps and equipment, he delivered his report. "We've found no sign of the bear family," he admitted, frustration evident in his voice. "Which is peculiar, given the frequency of sightings in this area previously. We've set camera traps and will continue monitoring, but it appears they've moved on." "Animals do migrate," Thomas suggested innocently. "Perhaps they've simply followed natural food sources elsewhere." The biologist looked unconvinced, but had no counter-evidence. We'll maintain surveillance for another week. If there are no further sightings, we'll consider the situation resolved for now." After he left, the family gathered in Lily's bedroom, away from the remaining officials outside. Dr. Webb joined them, her scientific demeanor cracking to reveal genuine emotion. "I've never witnessed anything like what I saw today," she admitted, perching on the edge of Lily's bed. "There's no scientific explanation for the level of communication I observed between Lily and that bear." "Maybe science doesn't have all the answers yet," Grace suggested gently. "Maybe the simplest answer is the right one," Thomas added. "That sometimes compassion creates connections that transcend normal boundaries." Lily, already drowsy from the day's adventures, murmured sleepily, "Star says thank you." The adults froze, exchanging startled glances. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Grace asked carefully. "In my head," Lily explained, her eyes drifting closed. "He says thank you and goodbye, and that their new home is beautiful." As Lily fell asleep, the adults retreated to the living room, grappling with implications beyond their understanding. Children her age often blur the line between reality and imagination, Dr. Webb offered half-heartedly. "Do they also predict bear behavior with perfect accuracy?" Thomas countered. Grace touched the researcher's arm. "What will you write in your report?" Dr. Webb considered this for a long moment. "That the bears displayed natural migration behavior consistent with seasonal patterns," she decided finally, "and that the unusual interactions previously observed were likely the result of specific environmental conditions unlikely to be replicated." "And the truth," Grace pressed. Dr. Webb smiled faintly. "The truth is for those who were there to witness it. Some connections aren't meant to be dissected and analyzed, as Thomas said." For the next week, wildlife officials maintained their surveillance, finding no trace of Star or his family. The media, after a few days without bear sightings or spectacular footage, gradually dispersed to chase other stories. Slowly, life in the Mason household began returning to normal. Except for one thing. Lily continued to share occasional messages from Star, describing his family's journey, their new territory, the tasty berries they had found. The adults listened without contradiction, uncertain whether they were hearing a child's imagination or something far more extraordinary. 1 month after the failed capture operation, a package arrived for the Masons, an official letter from the wilderness preserve on the far side of the mountains. Opening it, they found a brief note from the preserve's head ranger. "Thought you might be interested in this photograph taken by one of our automated wildlife cameras last week. The bear family has established territory in our most remote sector. Unusual migration pattern for this time of year, but they seem to be thriving. Distinctive white chest marking on the male made me think of your situation. Remarkable coincidence, wouldn't you say?" Attached was a clear image of Star, his mate, and their cubs, settled comfortably beside a mountain stream, miles from human habitation, safe in their new home. That night, as Thomas tucked Lily into bed, she smiled sleepily. "I told you he understood." Thomas smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Yes, you did, and we should have believed you from the start." "It's okay," Lily yawned. "Grown-ups need to learn things slowly sometimes." As Thomas turned out the light, Lily added one more thing. "Daddy?" "Star says there are other animals who need help too. Animals who are scared or hurt or don't understand humans." Thomas paused in the doorway. "What does that mean, sweetheart?" "It means I have more work to do," Lily replied simply, before drifting into peaceful sleep,